It's been one of the biggest storylines of the year on the Red brand, and for weeks on end, Seth Rollins has been looking for an answer on why his Shield brethren for many years turned his back on both him and Roman Reigns. Whilst he eventually got an answer, it didn't change the constant animosity between the two, and even though the prize of the Intercontinental Championship was on the line at the pay-per-view, their encounter on Sunday night meant more than just the prize of a championship. It was much more personal than that. The heelish antics of Ambrose and the history they shared together as brothers should have culminated in the two giving each other a severe beatdown at the pay-per-view. However, that wasn't the case, as the match turned into a clean one-on-one that lasted over 20 minutes and included a number of rest holds and hardly any passion to fight in what was supposed to be a blood feud. Ultimately, it was deemed as one of the worst matches on the card, not in terms of wrestling, but in terms of interest of the match. This obviously came as a shock, as it was arguably one of the most anticipated matches on the stacked card. Most would have assumed that with this being one of the biggest and most heated feuds of the year, making things personal by name-dropping Roman Reigns, who in real life is battling leukemia, this would have been one of the few matches that should have been given the TLC stipulation, or should have been at the least a dirty brawl. The start of the match barely resembled anything like a serious feud. Rollins should have run down to the ring with serious aggression, eager to fight his former ally, but instead the match started surprisingly slow, with the two exchanging blows and Rollins taking control for most of the beginning of the match. Things started to pick up during the second half of the match, as it finally looked like the two were going to get aggressive, as Ambrose furiously slammed Rollins on the announcer's table, but immediately after this, Ambrose would keep Rollins grounded with a number of middle rope elbows and submissions. In the closing stages of the match, Ambrose's dirty tactics at least surfaced when he tried to grovel to Rollins and catch him off guard, but even though Rollins didn't fall for it, Ambrose managed to get the dirty deeds for the win and managed to capture the Intercontinental Championship. Again, this being such a personal feud, why did WWE Creative opt to have such a civilized match? Now, we're not saying it was a bad match in terms of wrestling, but this looked like a match that Rollins or Ambrose could have had with any other superstar. Whilst the ending was all well and good, as this proves that Rollins is more than likely going to move on to bigger things, possibly entering and winning the Rumble and meeting Lesnar at WrestleMania, WWE's head honcho Vince McMahon was reportedly furious backstage at the match. Why was he furious? Well, minutes into the match, there were mutters of boring chants among some areas of the crowd, but then it got worse after a few minutes, as now the majority of the crowd were clearly bored, screaming, "This is boring" chants. It didn't help that this match followed the tremendous bout between Styles and Daniel Bryan for the championship, and it was the same length of time, but fans were having none of it. Dave Meltzer discussed the match on the Wrestling Observer Radio and noted that their encounter actually fell in the buffer match position, which some might call the piss break match, a spot that was usually reserved for terrible and uninteresting diva matches a few years ago. How times have changed. He also noted that Vince was furious with the two after the crowd's reaction, saying, "There's a lot of reasons that match didn't work. Vince McMahon was furious at it too." But how can Vince blame them? Their wrestling ability wasn't the issue, it was all Creative's fault and what they'd done to butcher this storyline. The feud has been lackluster at best after WWE decided to pull the plug on using Roman's real-life battle with leukemia for heat, and instead the storyline has gotten ridiculous, with a germophobic Ambrose getting vaccinations in the backside, wearing a gas mask to the ring, and altering his attire with a variation of out-of-place heavy coats. Reportedly, this is just one of a series of matches WWE has planned between the two going into 2019. It's likely WWE can still salvage the feud, but just how can they do this? Given the two had such a phenomenal feud in 2014 when the roles were reversed, and looking at their encounter at SummerSlam, it proves that they can still salvage this feud and get it right in the end. It's a little perplexing why they think that the Natalya Ruby Riott storyline that involves getting heat on the real life passing of her father isn't crossing the line, but using Reigns? No, that's going too far. If WWE really want to recover from this, they have to make this feud more serious. Ambrose needs to get serious heat, not just cheap and useless heat by wearing a gas mask to the ring and telling fans their town stinks. No, it needs to be more than this. What do you guys think of their match at TLC? And how can WWE salvage it in your opinion? Let us know in the comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.